Over the past few days, we've talked about different players the Mariners could either trade for or sign in free agency to take over the position from Jarred Kelenic in left field, or possibly to be a platoon type player that could give Ty France a day off at first base. And in this video, we're going to go over my top 4 targets that the Mariners should trade for to platoon with Jarred Kelenic or to take some days from Ty France so he can get off his feet. These 4 players are not sexy picks, however these are picks that I think could really benefit the Mariners while not costing them all that much. And when I say platoon with Jarred Kelenic, I mean on days that they are facing lefties. When the Mariners are facing lefties, then Jarred Kelenic could take a seat on the bench and these guys could hit in his place. That doesn't mean that these guys couldn't start over Jarred Kelenic, but that was kind of the criteria that I gave myself going into this exercise. And at the end, I'm also going to have one extra player that I would really like, but I don't think it would ever happen. First, let's start with outfielder Randal Grichuk. Now, Grichuk played for the Colorado Rockies next year. It's always hard looking at Rocky stats, trying to decide how that fits when he played in Coors Field compared to somewhere like Seattle. But in 2022, Randal Grichuk hit 259, 299, 425. He put up a WRC plus of 88. Again, nothing sexy about Randal Grichuk here. He hit 19 home runs with 73 RBIs and stole 4 bases. Throughout his career, Randal Grichuk has been a pretty good player, with his best years coming when he was with the Cardinals. In 2022, Grichuk played 106 games in right field, 52 in center, and 1 at DH. Now, this doesn't mean that he couldn't play left field, it's just he didn't in 2022. And while Grichuk's numbers weren't that great, against lefties, he's actually been a pretty good player. He hit 308 versus lefties in 2020 over the course of 180 plate appearances. 11 of his 19 home runs came against lefties, and again, who knows how that really works out for him when he was not playing in Colorado, but we can actually somewhat look at that if we go back to 2021 numbers. He hit 246 versus lefties compared to 239 versus righties, and he had 6 of his home runs come against lefties. And just to give us a nice 3-year sample size, in 2020 shortened season, Randal Grichuk hit 328 versus lefties and 252 versus righties. All in all, in his career, he is a 261 hitter versus lefties. Now, if that means that we put him in left field with Jarred Kelenic on the days that Jarred would be facing a lefty, then I think this is a really good move for the Mariners because A, Randal Grichuk probably isn't going to cost that much, and B, he's a decent player that's been around for a while. We've heard that the Rockies do like Chris Flexen, and if the Mariners wanted to trade Chris Flexen to the Rockies for Randal Grichuk, maybe even a 1-for-1 swap, it's not the worst idea in the world. I would like to get a little bit more from Flexen, especially with how the starting pitching market's kind of working out this year, but alas, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, in 2022, Grichuk hit 307 at home and 205 away, but this is a way that I see the Mariners could help platoon with Jarred Kelenic out there in left field to lengthen their lineup a little bit. Next up, we're looking at Luis Rengifo for the Los Angeles Angels. Now, he's signed with the Angels through 2026, and he's been a really good player and a Mariner killer. In 2022, Luis Rengifo hit 264, 294, 429 with a 103 WRC plus. He hit 17 home runs with 52 RBIs, and he was a decent player for the Angels ball club. In 2022, he played 99 games at second, 39 at third, 19 at short, 5 in right, and 1 in left. So really, he didn't play a whole lot of left field, and he didn't play any first base. That doesn't mean he can't play those positions, it just means, again, he did not in 2022. However, he could play all around the diamond elsewhere for you. And in 2022, Luis Rengifo was a really good hitter against lefties. He hit 315 against lefties, hitting 11 of his 17 home runs against southpaws. And that's somewhat of a similar story throughout his entire career. He is a 251 hitter against lefties career and a 230 hitter against righties, with almost the same amount of home runs versus lefties in basically half of the at-bats. And with the Angels, honestly, I think Chris Flexen is a good fit too. Obviously, they're always looking for more pitching. Whether or not they'd want to trade in the division is hard to say, but acquiring someone like Luis Rengifo gives you a ton of room in your lineup to mix and match with different players, as Luis Rengifo can play all around the field for you. The next player on our list is Manuel Margot. Manny Margot for the Tampa Bay Rays. He is somehow still just 28 years old, which blows my mind. It feels like he's been around forever. In 2022, Manny Margot hit 274, 325, 375 with a 106 WRC plus, the first time in his career that he's had a WRC plus above 100. He put up a 1.5 WAR in 2022. He ended up hitting 4 home runs only with 36 RBIs and only playing in 89 games. Manny Margot is somebody that honestly could probably play every day more so than Jarred Kelenic, and his splits kind of tell that story. In 2022, he hit 346 versus lefties and 252 versus righties. He hit 1 of his 4 home runs versus lefties and 3 of them against righties. Overall, Manny Margot is probably a starting outfielder for you. Of course, his numbers are definitely worse versus right-handed pitching, but against lefties, Manny Margot is a lefty killer. He is so good against left-handed pitchers, and Jarred Kelenic could maybe be the lower end of that platoon if he was to come over to the Mariners. This is a move that would probably cost you a little bit more in terms of players you're sending back to the Rays. And we know how much the Rays love getting young, controllable players, especially pitchers. So I think I'd probably send Taylor Dollard that way, maybe Brian Wu, a couple lower level prospects that have yet to make the major leagues. So the Rays have a ton of time to control them. And I want to remind you that anytime we talk about stuff like this in this video, nothing is imminent. These are just things that we have looked up and information that we have seen. We are not preaching this. This is not gospel. We are not reporters. We have no sources telling us that this is what's happening unless we say otherwise. This is simply a fun little exercise where we take a look at who the Mariners could be after. One of my favorite players on this list is a reunion with outfielder Tyler O'Neill. Now, this is a very, very interesting position for the Mariners to be in and Tyler O'Neill. There's a chance that Tyler O'Neill gets pushed out of St. Louis. Obviously, he has the starting left field job for right now. They have Lars Nootbaar in right field and Dylan Carlson in center, but they just signed Wilson Contreras, who's played a lot in left field. They have other players that are probably looking for some playing time out there, and Tyler O'Neill is coming off of a down year. In 2021, O'Neill put up a nearly 6 WAR, but that is very, very different than the rest of his career. In 2022, he hit 228, 308, 392 with just a 101 WRC+. He hit 14 home runs and 58 RBI. O'Neill strikes out a lot. In 2022, he struck out 26.9% of the time in just 96 games. Again, he was such a good player in 2021. Even with that 31.3% strikeout rate, he still hit 286, 352, 560 with a 144 WRC+, and hit 34 home runs. But in 2022, you can see Tyler O'Neill was a 256 hitter versus lefties, whereas he was a 219 hitter versus right-handed pitching. He's definitely somebody who would play a lot against lefties, and while the Mariners would probably just give him the starting job if he was to come over to the Mariners, there's a good chance that Jarred Kelenic can see some of those days versus righties. Throughout his career, he's been pretty steady against lefties, as he's hit 259 versus lefties. So Tyler O'Neill is someone I would love to see the Mariners bring back, big old buff boy. But on the same team as him is actually somebody I would love to see the Mariners get even more. We mentioned this player in the last segment, but Dylan Carlson would probably be my dream player for this position for the Mariners. Of course, why would the Cardinals trade him? That's a great question, but nonetheless, this is my exercise and this is how we're doing it. In 2022, Carlson hit 236, 316, 380 with a 100 exactly WRC+, a 2.4 WAR. He hit 8 home runs with 42 RBIs. He played 73 games in center, 62 in right, and 2 at DH. No left field, but alas, I think he could probably play there. But it's Carlson's splits that really mean a lot to me. He hit 305 versus lefties compared to 207 versus righties. He hit 3 of his 8 home runs versus lefties, and he's just an all-around better player versus them. And these numbers are pretty steady, as he's a 317 hitter versus lefties throughout his career, compared to just a 225 hitter versus righties. Now, Dylan Carlson's just 24 years old. Why would the Cardinals want to give him up? And more than likely, they probably would not. They have control over him for quite a long time, and he was one of their top prospects. But for the same reason that Tyler O'Neill could be getting pushed out of St. Louis, I would say Dylan Carlson could also be getting pushed out of St. Louis. Of course, Dylan Carlson is a switch hitter, and he's very clearly better as a right-handed hitter than he is a left-handed hitter. If the Cardinals do want to move Lars Nootbaar around, if they want to keep Tyler O'Neill, they also have somebody like Nolan Gorman who may or may not stick up the middle of the infield. And they do have a few top prospects as well that are in the outfield, so Dylan Carlson could be on the move. A lot of these players are supplementary for the Seattle Mariners. These are players that would not make or break the team, but would definitely help out in a pinch. However, there's one player that I think would make this team an absolute contender, would make it so they didn't have to platoon with Jarred Kelenic in left field, and would hit at the top of the lineup. We have that video on the screen now. I appreciate you guys watching this one, and go Mariners.